We picture Viking raids as swift strikes, long ships cutting through morning mist, warriors charging up beaches, treasure loaded and gone by sunset. But the ships carried more than gold and silver back north. They carried women, torn from burning villages, bound with rope, dragged across the North Sea to cold halls where strange men spoke a brutal tongue. And what happened to these captured brides wasn't quick, it wasn't merciful, and the night after the raid was just the beginning. If you value documented Viking and Norse-era history like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also, comment from which city you're hearing this from. This script is researched and factual, using sources from the Icelandic sagas and archaeological evidence from Hedeby. Now back to the story. You're a young woman in 9th century Northumbria. Dawn breaks over your village near the River Tyne. Smoke rises from cooking fires, children splash in the shallows. Then the dragon-prowed ships appear around the bend. 40 warriors pour onto the beach. Your father grabs his sayax. Your brothers form a line. They die in minutes. The Norsemen don't waste time on ceremony. They grab you, your sister, 3 other women from neighboring huts. Rope burns your wrists. The ship lurches into deep water. England shrinks behind you. The crossing takes 3 days. No food. Salt spray stings cuts on your face. The warriors laugh and point. They're already deciding. The ship's bow cuts through gray swells toward a coastline you've never seen. Denmark, Norway. Somewhere in the cold north where winter lasts half the year and the sun barely climbs above the tree line. The longship beaches on a shingle strand. Strong hands haul you up a steep path. Ahead stands a timber hall, smoke leaking through the roof, carved dragon heads snarling from the gables. This is your new home. The Jarl who owns it paid for the raid. He's claiming his prize. That first night, you're dragged into the hall. Torches cast jumping shadows on carved pillars. The Jarl sits in his high seat, silver arm rings gleaming, a horn of mead in his fist. His warriors fill the benches. They've been drinking since the ships returned. They cheer when they see you. The Jarl stands. He's choosing first. The sagas don't dance around what happens next. They call it the wedding night. No ceremony, no vows, just possession. The Gragas law code from Iceland spells out the rules. A man can take a woman by force if he claims her as his wife afterward. The law protects him. It doesn't protect her. Archaeological evidence from Hedeby shows how this played out. Excavations in the 1980s uncovered a residential quarter near the harbor. Female skeletons in the houses showed trauma patterns, healed fractures, dental damage, stress markers in the bones. Isotope analysis reveals something darker. These women weren't born in Denmark. Their teeth formed in different soils. England, Ireland, Scotland, Francia. They were brought here. The night drags on. You're taken to a side room. Furs cover a raised platform. The Jarl follows. What happens behind those timber walls breaks you in ways a sword never could. The physical pain will heal. The knowledge that your property won't. Tomorrow you'll work in his kitchen. You'll bear his children. You'll watch other raiding ships return with other terrified women. The cycle never stops. Ibn Rusta, the 10th century Persian geographer, recorded what he saw in the Rus markets along the Volga. Women chained in wooden pens, prices marked on birch bark tags tied to their wrists. Young Celtic and Slavic captives sold for 20 dirhams each, older women for half that, children for 8. The buyers inspected teeth like they were buying horses. They checked for disease marks. They bargained over scars. The auction blocks weren't just in distant markets. Dublin had 3 slave squares by 925. Hedeby maintained holding pens near the harbor walls. York's Coppergate district processed hundreds of captives each season. The logistics were industrial. Ship manifests from Bergen list human cargo alongside amber and furs. 12 women from Ireland, 8 from Scotland, 3 children from the Orkneys. If you survive the first winter, you learn the language. You adapt or you die. Some captured women become powerful. They birth future jarls. They manage vast households. They accumulate silver and land, but they never forget that first night. How they got here, what they lost. The economics were brutal. A healthy young woman cost the same as 2 horses or 50 sheep. But she produced value for decades. Children to work the fields, daughters to trade for alliances, labor that never stopped. The investment paid itself back within 5 years. Every pregnancy was profit. Gragas law preserves the voice of one captured woman, a Celtic slave named Melkorka. She served in the household of Huskuldur the White. For years, she pretended to be mute, silent, broken. Then her son grew old enough to understand speech. She whispered to him in Gaelic. Told him stories of Ireland, of green hills and stone towers and the life she'd lived before the ships came. Her silence was defiance. Her words were rebellion. The pregnancy rates tell the real story. Skeletal analysis from Trelleborg shows captured women bore children at twice the rate of native Norse women. 7 to 8 pregnancies versus 3 to 4. They were breeding stock. Their bodies were territories to be conquered and held. The high mortality rates during childbirth, 30% for captured women versus 15% for free Norse wives, reveal the deliberate neglect. But Melkorka was rare. Most captured brides disappeared into the northern darkness. No sagas preserve their names. No stones mark their graves. They became mothers to children who would never know their mothers. Real stories. Their bloodlines flow through modern Scandinavia. Millions of descendants who have no idea their ancestors were stolen from burning villages across the sea. The physical evidence extends beyond bones. Textile analysis from Burka reveals Celtic weaving patterns in Norse garments. These weren't trade imports. The threads matched local wool. The dyes came from Scandinavian plants. Captured women were maintaining their cultural skills while adapting to available materials. They wove memory into cloth. They kept traditions alive in thread and pattern. The DNA tells the truth, the sagas won't. Genetic studies of modern Icelanders reveal massive Celtic ancestry. 60% of the female lineages trace back to Ireland and Scotland. These weren't willing immigrants, they were cargo, human spoils loaded onto longships and carried north to lives they never chose. Mitochondrial DNA analysis from the Faroe Islands shows the same pattern. 84% Celtic maternal ancestry. The math is stark. Every Norse settlement from Iceland to Greenland carries the genetic signature of systematic abduction. The captured brides weren't exceptions. They were the foundation of Viking expansion. If these documented histories matter to you, hit subscribe and comment your location. This research uses archaeological evidence from multiple Scandinavian sites. Back to the story. Winter arrives early in the north. The halls go quiet. Stored grain runs low. Tempers flare. The captured women who resist face worse than death. They face the thralls, quarters, stone cells beneath the main hall. No light, no warmth. Scraps of food pushed through gaps in the timber. Some women break after days in the dark. Others die there. The Jomsvikings maintained specialized punishment facilities. Excavations at Wollen uncovered underground chambers with iron rings set into stone walls. Wear patterns on the metal show heavy use over decades. Scratch marks on the stone walls form patterns, words, names. Prayers in languages the captors couldn't read. Celtic Ogham script, Slavic runic marks. Final messages carved with fingernails and hope. Spring brings new raids, new ships, new women. The cycle turns again. You watch younger captives arrive, terror bright in their eyes. You remember that look? You want to help them? But speaking up means the cells. Silence means survival. You choose silence. The raiding schedules followed seasonal patterns. Spring departures from Norwegian fjords. Summer strikes across the North Sea. Autumn returns, loaded with captives. Winter auctions in the major trading centers. The business ran on precise timing. Ships that returned late faced reduced prices. Damaged goods sold at steep discounts. Years pass. Your children grow tall. They speak Norse. They worship Thor. They have no memory of the green island where their grandmother was born. Your son wins his first sword. Your daughter learns to weave. They look like any other Norse children, but their blood remembers. Deep in their bones, Ireland calls. The captured brides weren't just victims. They were weapons. Each pregnancy was conquest. Each child born pushed Celtic genes deeper into the Norse bloodline. The raiders thought they were claiming property. They were actually surrendering their genetic future. The women they stole ultimately conquered them. Linguistic evidence supports the genetic data. Old Norse borrowed heavily from Celtic languages during the Viking Age. Technical terms for textile work, agricultural vocabulary, household management words. These weren't casual adoptions. They reflected systematic cultural transmission from captured women to their Norse-speaking children. Archaeological evidence from the Orkney Islands shows how complete this conquest was. Norse graves from the 9th and 10th centuries contain distinctly Celtic artifacts, bronze brooches, silver torques, patterned stones. These weren't trade goods. They were personal items, memory objects, things the captured women fought to keep. Even in death, they held onto pieces of home. The brooch styles evolved over generations. Early graves show pure Celtic designs. Later burials blend Norse and Celtic elements. The captured women were training their daughters, teaching metalworking techniques, passing down artistic traditions. The conquerors' graves filled with their victims' culture. But genetics and artifacts don't capture the psychological cost. The captured brides lived in permanent exile. They spoke languages their children would never learn. They remembered songs no one would ever hear again. They carried the weight of entire cultures that died with them. Their trauma became their descendants' inheritance. Medical analysis of skeletal remains reveals chronic stress patterns, elevated cortisol markers in bone tissue, dental wear consistent with teeth grinding, joint inflammation from repetitive labor. These women's bodies recorded decades of psychological pressure. The trauma left physical signatures that survived 1,000 years in northern soil. Some tried to escape. The sagas record a few attempts, women who slipped away during storms, who stole boats and tried to sail south. The North Sea killed most of them. The few who survived the water faced worse punishments when dragged back: public flogging, branding, sale to other households where the treatment was crueler. The Heimskringla preserves one escape attempt in detail, a woman named Asta from the Hebrides. She waited 3 years, learned the coastline, studied the winds. During a spring gale, she took a fishing boat and sailed toward Scotland. The currents carried her east instead. She beached on Jutland. Danish farmers found her half dead from exposure. They returned her to her Norwegian owner for a reward of 2 silver marks. The smart ones waited. They learned. They planned. They used the one weapon men couldn't take away, their children's love. Captured mothers whispered Celtic words into tiny ears. They sang Irish lullabies in the darkness. They told stories of saints and kings and green shores far across the water. These weren't just memories. They were seeds of revolution. Religious conversion records from Iceland show this hidden influence. Children of captured Celtic women converted to Christianity at 3 times the rate of pure Norse families. They were drawn to the faith their mothers whispered about. The political implications terrified the Jarls. Christian children meant Christian heirs. Christian heirs meant the end of Thor's dominance. Some seeds grew. The Landnámabók, Iceland's settlement book, records a curious pattern. Norse sons who sailed west, who chose Ireland over Norway, who spoke of their mothers, stories, and wanted to see the Green Isle for themselves. They were going home to places they'd never been, following blood memory across the whale road to lands their captured mothers had described in whispers. The reverse migration peaked around 1050. Second and third generation descendants of captured Celtic women established settlements in Western Ireland. They spoke Norse, but practiced Celtic customs. They built longhouses, but arranged them around Celtic courtyards. They were trying to reconstruct a homeland they'd inherited through stories, but most captured brides never saw rescue. They died in foreign soil, under foreign stars, speaking foreign words. Their bodies rest in graves marked with runestones that record their captors, names, not their own. The archaeology reveals their presence. The bones don't lie, but their voices are silent forever. The naming patterns and runic inscriptions reveal this erasure. Thousands of memorial stones mention women as property. Here lies Eric, who owned 3 thralls. Olaf's woman bore him 5 sons, never their birth names, never their homelands. The stones remember the owners, they forget the owned. The truth sits in a Stockholm museum. Inventory number SHM 27549. A small silver pendant found in a 9th century grave near Uppsala. Christian cross on one side, Celtic knotwork on the other. The DNA from the skeleton tests Celtic, female, age 20 to 25, multiple healed fractures. She wore both faiths. Kept both worlds alive in silver and memory. She died far from home. The trade networks extended far beyond Scandinavia. Adam of Bremen recorded slave markets operating in Hamburg, Schleswig, and Magdeburg by 1020. The captured Celtic and Slavic women moved through these centers like any other commodity. Bills of sale scratched on wax tablets show the prices. A young Irish woman sold for 36 silver denarii in Hamburg. A Scottish girl brought 28 in Schleswig. The merchants kept careful records. Business was business. The psychological warfare was deliberate. Captured women were paraded through Norse settlements before being assigned to households. The public display served multiple purposes. It demonstrated the success of recent raids. It terrorized any captured women already in the community. It reminded everyone of their place in the hierarchy. You were property. You would remain property. Resistance was futile, but some learned to game the system. The saga of Gunnlod tells of a captured Irish woman who became indispensable to her captor's household. She spoke multiple languages. She could read and write Latin. She managed trade negotiations with visiting merchants. Her value extended beyond reproduction. Within 5 years, she controlled the household finances. By year 10, she owned property in her own name. The captor had become dependent on his captive. The children born to captured mothers faced their own brutal realities. They were neither fully Norse nor fully Celtic. The boys could earn acceptance through valor in battle. The girls faced harder choices. Marriage to Norse men meant betraying their mothers. Blood? Refusal meant the slave markets themselves. They walked a knife's edge between 2 worlds that would never fully accept them. Archaeological evidence from Gotland reveals the scale of this cultural mixing. Grave goods from the 10th century show Celtic metalwork techniques applied to Norse designs. Bronze pins with Scandinavian shapes, but Irish knotwork patterns. Silver arm rings with Norse runes spelling Celtic names. The captured women were teaching their skills while adapting to new artistic traditions. Culture flowed both ways through the chain of captivity. The seasonal cycles governed everything. Spring raids launched from Norwegian fjords when the ice broke. Summer brought the richest prizes. Villages relaxed their guard during harvest season. Autumn returns coincided with the great markets at Hedeby and Birka. Winter was sorting season. The healthy captives went to established households. The sick and injured filled the slave pens. Spring cleaned out the surplus through fresh sales or convenient deaths. Document evidence from the monastery at Iona records specific raid dates and casualties. June 14th, 806, 37 monks killed, 68 women and children taken. August 23rd, 825, the entire population of the outer settlements vanished. The monks kept careful records. They knew the patterns. They could predict when the ships would return, but prediction didn't mean prevention. The Celtic communities had no naval power to match the Viking fleets. Their stone towers and earth walls could delay raiders but not stop them. The captured women became unwilling intelligence assets. They carried information about their homelands back to Norse war councils, troop strengths, defensive positions, hidden wealth caches. Every captured bride was a security breach that enabled future raids. Some women chose death over capture. The annals of Ulster record mass drownings when Celtic communities realized escape was impossible. June 9th, 841, the women of Armagh threw themselves and their children into the river Callan, rather than face the chains. The Norse found 17 bodies downstream. They took the grain stores and burned the empty village. The psychological impact rippled across generations. Children born to captured mothers suffered higher rates of what we'd now recognize as inherited trauma. Skeletal analysis shows chronic stress markers even in juveniles. Teeth grinding patterns, joint inflammation, growth disruption. The captive mothers, fear and despair literally shaped their children's bones and minds. Economic records from Dublin show the slave trade's massive scale. By 900, the city processed over 2,000 captives annually. The harbor district maintained holding facilities for 800 people. Feeding costs alone required 40 tons of grain per month. The infrastructure was enormous, purpose-built markets, specialized shipping, administrative bureaucrats who managed human inventory like any other business commodity. The buyers came from across the known world. Norse jarls seeking household workers, Frankish nobles acquiring exotic servants, Islamic merchants purchasing concubines for Eastern harems. The captured Celtic women scattered across 3 continents. Some died in Greenland's frozen valleys. Others served in Cordoba's sunlit palaces. The lucky ones never learned how far they'd traveled from home. Medical examination of remains from Trelleborg reveals the physical toll. Captured women showed bone density loss consistent with calcium deficiency. Poor nutrition during pregnancy led to dental problems and skeletal deformities. They were fed enough to work and breed, but not enough to thrive. Their bodies became archives of systematic neglect. Religious artifacts tell another story of resistance. Small Christian symbols hidden in otherwise pagan graves, Celtic cross pendants worn under Norse clothing, prayer beads disguised as everyday jewelry. The captured women maintained their faith in secret. They whispered Latin prayers in households dedicated to Thor and Odin. Their hidden Christianity became seed for Scandinavia's eventual conversion. The language evolution accelerated during peak raiding periods. Old Norse absorbed hundreds of Celtic loanwords between 800 and 1000. Technical terms for agriculture, textiles, and household management. The vocabulary shift reflects massive cultural transmission from captured mothers to their children. The conquerors learned from the conquered through the most intimate possible channel, childhood education. Trade route analysis shows how captured women enabled Viking expansion. They spoke the languages of target regions. They knew the customs and taboos. They could identify valuable targets and safe harbors. Every successful raid built intelligence for future expeditions. The captured brides became unwilling architects of their own peoples. Destruction. Some found power through tragedy. Queen Gormflaith of Dublin was originally captured from Leinster as a teenage girl. She bore 3 sons to her captor before arranging his assassination during a feast. She seized control of his warband and fleet. By 40, she commanded raids against her former captors. Her revenge burned through Ireland for 2 decades. Capture became conquest through patience and steel. The genetic evidence extends beyond maternal lineages. Y chromosome analysis of modern Celtic populations shows corresponding Scandinavian admixture. The raids worked both ways. Celtic men who survived initial attacks sometimes joined Viking crews. The prospect of wealth and adventure outweighed ethnic loyalty. Some became successful raiders themselves. They returned to attack their own former communities. War makes monsters of everyone. Recent excavations at Ribe have uncovered something that reframes everything we thought we knew about captured brides. A mass grave dated to 873. 47 female skeletons. All show evidence of violent death. All test positive for Celtic isotope signatures. But here's what changes the story. They're buried with honor. Grave goods, silver, weapons. These weren't discarded slaves, they were fallen warriors. The soil analysis around the grave reveals burn patterns, ash layers filled with metal fragments. This wasn't an execution site. It was a battlefield. The captured women had organized an uprising. They seized weapons from an armory. They fought Norse warriors in open combat. They died with honor, and their enemies buried them with respect. The rebellion was written in bronze and blood, not words. That pendant in Stockholm represents thousands of women, stolen lives, broken chains of memory. But those bones at Ribe represent something else, the final victory that comes from refusing to be broken. The captured brides paid the ultimate price. But their stolen voices echo in the genes of a million descendants who carry their courage in their blood.